Привіт, мої друзі. Hello, my friends. Welcome. It is day 351. We have a lot of news to cover today, and so here's what we're going to talk about. Zelenskyy spoke to the British Parliament and asked for jets. Then he went to Europe and he spoke to the Europeans and he asked for jets. And we'll talk about the outcome of that. But this guy is just brilliant in the way that he does it. I'm going to show you a number of clips of the speech to the British Parliament, and you'll have a sense of what was actually said. We'll go over a news lightning round. I'll try to do the news very, very quickly. We'll have some fun with Russian state media, and we'll talk about what happened 1 year ago today. Here we go. I'm going to start with this article in The Guardian. Volodymyr Zelenskyy makes an appeal for jets in an address to the British Parliament. Just a little bit from here in historic address to the members of Commons and the Lords in Westminster Hall. So he's going to have stairs in the background. All the members are standing for however long he's speaking, and it's going to be a little echoey. So just be aware, it's in Westminster Hall. Now, Prime Minister Sunak said it's time to give Ukraine the extra equipment that they need to defeat Putin and bring peace to Ukraine. He said the single best use of the 100 Typhoon planes in the UK's possession is to deploy them now for the protection of Ukraine, adding, the faster we do it, the better. Okay, with that as a setup, let's look at what Zelenskyy had to say.
London has stood with Kiev since day one. From the first seconds and minutes of the full-scale war, Great Britain, you extended your helping hand when the world had not yet come to understand how to react. Boris, you got others united when it seemed absolutely impossible. Thank you.
Now, I remember seeing this when it first happened, and I thought, wow, Boris Johnson is on the ground in Kyiv when it was unsafe, and I was thinking, well, where is our president? Why are we not there? He displaced the U.S., and as an American, I'm very patriotic, but he was displacing the U.S. as the on the pointy edge of the spear in fight for freedom, and he gets absolute credit for being right there with Ukraine. He deserves every inch of that.
You, all of you all showed your grit and character back then. Strong British character.
Okay, and complimenting the people that you're talking about is always a good idea, and Zelensky's masterful at talking to the audience. Here's the next clip.
You and us and the whole mankind achieved similar result. Evil lost.
Here, the context was World War II. He was talking about what happened then. Look how they're standing. They're all standing. They must have been there for like an hour before he got there, and then they're standing through a half hour or more worth of speech. And it's just, and look at the hall. It's Westminster Hall.
We will always come out on top of evil. This lies at the core of our, but also your traditions. However, the horizon never stays clear for a while.
That's right.
Once the old evil is defeated, the new one is attempting to rise its head. Do you have a feeling that the evil will crumble once again? I can see in your eyes now we think the same way as you do. We know freedom will win.
Yep, great line.
We know Russia will lose. And we really know the victory will change the world. And this will be a change that the world has long needed.
So what's really interesting about that is Zelenskyy is the one that changed the trajectory of the world. By standing up to Putin, he actually changed what happened geopolitically. And he's understating himself, but what he did was absolutely amazing. Okay, let's go on to the third clip.
Importantly, together with the G7, we brought about a coalition of values, a coalition that protects the rule-based world order and human rights, a coalition
The
that
rule-based
will work
world
in
the rule-based world order. This is what Putin keeps railing against. This who set up this rules-based world order? Well, actually, you were part of it, but I mean, like he keeps trying to want to, like, there's this unipolar world. It's led by America, and he wants to have this bipolar world where Russia is like a big leader. Russia, you don't have the GDP of Texas. You have the population of the US's 5 or 6 top states. That's your population. And your GDP is not even the size of Texas. The only reason that you feel tough is because you have nukes. That's it. That's the only reason. So, but he wants to be like the former Soviet Union and have his own bloc. China could arguably make this case that China could be this other side, and we're aware of that, but Russia, you're not. But that's what he keeps going for. So this rule-based order is something that Putin keeps denigrating at every step, every time he gets a chance to say it.
such a way that over time there will simply be no gray areas in the world in which human life doesn't matter.
And that's a great line, right? There should be no gray areas where human life does not matter. Okay, let's go on to the next clip.
Do everything possible and impossible to make the world provide us with modern planes to empower and protect pilots who will be protecting us. And I'm proud of our Air Force. And I brought a present from them to you, Great Britain. Yes, please. Open this.
Okay, he's asking for modern planes,
Yes.
and this is what he's giving Great Britain as a gift.
Yes. To the speaker. Yes, speaker. Hello.
Now, if you remember your history, this is huge. Great Britain, the Royal Air Force in World War II, saved Britain, kept them in the fight. Their planes went down at a record rate. I mean, it was when Churchill talked about never have been so much owed to so few by so many, or whatever that line was. He was talking about the battle for Britain with the Royal Air Force defending the island.
I will explain. It's the helmet of a real Ukrainian pilot. He is one of our most successful aces, and he's one of our kings. And the writing on the helmet reads, "We have freedom, give us wings to protect it."
Wow, what a powerful line. We have freedom, give us wings to protect it. Okay, Zelensky's hitting all the highest notes here. He's doing such a great job with this speech, with targeting what he needs and how he's speaking to his audience. Okay, here's the last clip.
No, it is impossible to completely erase evil from human nature.
And that's right. I mean, evil runs through all our hearts. We could all be involved in evil, but you're not going to get rid of it completely. But we have to defend freedom wherever evil rises up.
Yet it is in our power to guarantee with words and deeds that the light side of human nature will prevail. The side you and us share, and this stands above anything else. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your support. And leaving British Parliament 2 years ago, I thanked you for delicious English tea.
Okay, so it's always a good idea to talk about the things that the audience likes, like their English tea, and he goes on and he doubles down on this.
And I will be leaving the Parliament today, thanking all of you in advance for powerful English planes.
That's right. There we go. Great line, great delivery. Okay, so let's go on to the next thing. So what was the result of that? Sunak says nothing is off the table as Zelenskyy asks for jets. And we get down into the article. The PM has now ordered the Defense Secretary to examine ways that the UK can provide Ukraine with fighter jets. The RAF has a limited number of aircraft. It could theoretically provide the Ukraine, including about 20 older Typhoon jets. Well, 20 beats nothing, and that's for sure. Now, we also have this article. Zelenskyy tells EU leaders, now he goes to the EU after the UK, EU leaders that there is no free Europe without a free Ukraine. And I think that's right. There is a battle for Europe, for freedom, for authoritarianism or democracy that's being fought in Ukraine. Zelenskyy said that Ukraine had never wanted, never provoked the full-scale war launched by Russia 1 year ago, and that the security of Europe as a whole was tied to the war's outcome. This is correct. He never wanted it, and he never provoked it, and that's a Russian propaganda point that he's countering. The unity of Europe is fundamental to security, Zelenskyy said, adding that a free Europe cannot be imagined without a free Ukraine. I think that's right. The trip to Brussels gave Zelenskyy the opportunity to speak to all 27 leaders of the European Union following visits to Britain and France earlier. Okay, let's keep going. War in Ukraine. Zelenskyy takes fighter jet bid to EU leaders, so he's asking them for these fighter jets. Several EU leaders have already stressed that the decision on warplanes would be a collective move, and it's crossing a line, but they can cross the line together more safely. Now, the Kremlin is warning that the line between direct and indirect Western involvement in the conflict was disappearing because they're trying to push them back. They're trying to deter. In fact, at the end of the article, you see Dmitry Peskov say, "We regret this and state that such actions of these countries lead to the escalation of tension around this conflict and prolong it and make it more painful and torturous for Ukraine." Not if they win. And so that's the difference. Not if they win. If they win, then it's not more torturous for Ukraine. It's actually a great thing for Ukraine. But the result of this, while the Prime Minister was asking to look at this, Ben Wallace, the Defense Minister, said that at least right now, there will be no immediate transfer of UK fighter jets to Ukraine. Ben Wallace was cited as saying, as President Volodymyr Zelenskyy continues his tour of Europe in a push for air cover. Despite Prime Minister Sunak saying that nothing was off the table, the Defense Secretary told the BBC that gifting any fighter jets would potentially take months. But the ball's in motion. He's asked for it. I think they'll get it eventually down the line as things progress. Okay, let's turn to kind of a speed news lightning round. I'm not going to go as in-depth with these articles, but I'll try to give them a quick summary. So here's the British Ministry of Defense and their update. They said they were talking about cross-country mobility conditions. With the ground frozen, they can fight in a certain way. But in a little while, CCM, cross-country mobility, is likely to be as worse with extreme muddy conditions over mid to late March. Commanders on both sides will highly likely seek to avoid scheduling major offensives at such times. That's about the time that tanks are going to be arriving in mass. There are some tanks in country, but by the time tanks start to really arrive. So if the Ukrainians can simply stave things off for 2 months, they'll have reinforcements coming very shortly in the way of tanks. The ISW talked about how Russian forces have already regained the initiative and Ukraine have begun their next major offensive. Russian military command additionally appears to have fully committed elements of several conventional divisions. The commitment of these divisions, at least 3 major Russian divisions, to its operations in this sector indicates the Russian offensive has begun, even if Ukrainian forces are so far preventing Russian forces from securing significant gains. It's not been going well, even though they're kind of overwhelming, but kind of getting pushed back. I mean, the Russians are really starting to push on a few major fronts, but they're getting hammered in some ways too because they're not really well trained. Smashed by Ukrainian mines and artillery, Russia's winter offensive has ground to a halt outside Voldahar. Voldahar is a train wreck. I would highly recommend that you look at other channels like reporting from Ukraine and others just to see what's going on with that. I don't spend time covering that. Russia loses over 20 generals in the war against Ukraine, said the Japanese intelligence. That is absolutely amazingly high. You didn't lose a fraction of that in Afghanistan in 10 years. Here's another article. Prigozhin talks about how they've stopped recruiting prisoners. The recruitment of prisoners by the Wagner Group has completely stopped, he said. And then there's a little bit more about that in a different article where they were talking about they've recruited up to 40,000 convicts, according to U.S. intelligence. Okay, shifting gears again, Russia may have lost up to half its operational tank fleet in Ukraine, a monitoring group says. So this group is actually counting. They only count these tanks when they have eyeballs on those particular tanks. Russia has potentially lost up to half its operational tank fleet since the war began. The group said this week that it has verified 1,000 distinct Russian tank losses during the war. It said a further 544 Russian tanks have been captured by Ukrainian forces, 79 damaged, 65 abandoned. Now, they're not counting those that they have not been able to visually confirm. So he estimates that the actual toll could be closer to 2,000 tanks, and they only had 3,000 operational tanks going into this. So the hundreds of tanks that are going to be flowing into the country are going to be huge for Ukraine. So let's turn our attention to the economy for just a little bit. Tourism to Russia plummets to 4% of pre-pandemic levels. It was coming up and then they invaded, it all fell apart. On top of that, you also have business that is collapsed and gone away, and now's the time to turn our attention to fun with Russian state media. Putin wishes all the best to all foreign brands that have left the Russian market. Hey, we don't need your stinking dollars anyway, right? He says, all the best. Due to the loss of our market, they are suffering huge losses. It's their choice. It's their decision. Actually, you're suffering a far greater amount. Okay. Top Russian lawmaker labels U.S. president a terrorist. I think this is great. I think the Russians should officially label Biden a terrorist or the U.S. a terrorist so that the U.S. can appropriately put that label back on Russia, and it'll hurt them a whole lot more than it will hurt the U.S. Okay, let's turn our attention to what was happening 1 year ago today. Moscow denies deal to de-escalate as Macron meets with Ukrainian leader. Moscow on Tuesday denied reports that President Vladimir Putin and French President Macron had reached a tentative agreement on de-escalation in the Ukrainian crisis. French officials had indicated that Macron left Moscow with the understanding that Russia would not keep troops in Belarus near the Ukrainian border after military exercises end this month. Well, he kind of kept his promise. They weren't in Belarus, but not exactly the way he was thinking. This was in Al Jazeera. No, Russia will not invade Ukraine. Well, he kind of got it wrong, but he gives a good reason why he's thinking that. Moscow has denied that it is making such plans, although it has not withdrawn its troops. Some observers have interpreted these Russian statements as untruthful. Yeah, they are. Okay, a closer examination of Russia's geopolitical behavior in the past 2 decades, however, demonstrates that its officials might not necessarily be trying to deceive the international community. A full-scale war in Ukraine does not really fit into how the Kremlin has used hard power in geopolitical games. The examples of Georgia, Syria, and Libya so far, Ukraine, show that it pursues a cost-efficient policy, but they were because they thought that they could knock it over in 2 weeks and be done with it. But a year later, here we are. If you've gotten some value out of what I've talked about today, I would really appreciate a like, a thumbs up, a subscribe, whatever you can do. Leave comments below, help the YouTube algorithm, help me reach others. I want to thank those of you who have bought me a coffee. I really appreciate it. It warms my heart to know that somebody cares. And I would ask you to do one more thing. If you're still watching at this point, I put this out, and all the proceeds from this book are going to go to Ukrainian relief. I would ask you, so now you can do this. You can, instead of buying a copy, if you buy a copy, the proceeds will go. If you simply download a free sample, you will see what's in it. All it is a table of context about Russian propaganda points, and then it says this page intentionally blank, this page intentionally blank, this page intentionally blank, because this is a complete collection of the Vladimir Putin's truth about Ukraine. So I would ask you to do me a huge favor. If you go down to the bottom of this, and the link is below, there's no reviews. Can you write a review that's not giving it away, like this book's awesome or something along those lines? To the degree that we have these reviews, more people will buy it and more help will go to Ukraine just because of your review. And I thank you so much for that. I thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.